Well, I'm delighted to be here with you. Wow, it got dark. Can you all see me okay? I want to first thank our gracious hosts, Paul and everybody at Durham University. This is a fantastic place to hold this conference, and I'm actually very impressed with this location. I understand that tonight we're going to have dinner at a castle, the structure of which was built in the 10th century. Is that right? Which is amazing to an American, because in order for us to see structures that old, we have to travel down to Mexico and enjoy the structures of the Aztecs and the Mayan and all that, civilizations that have long since gone. So that's fantastic. I look forward to dining with you all. You know, SunGard is in a period of transition. And I want to talk a little bit about that. At the beginning of last year, 2010, we introduced a bold new vision and strategy for the future. It's called the Open Digital Campus, and today I'd like to give you a status of where we are and talk about what's still to come, but give you some proof and examples of things that have occurred already relative to this strategy. This is not just about technology. It's not even just about products. It is, in fact, about a number of mechanics as well around how to actually make this happen and make these goals real. And ideally, today, what I'd like to do is just give you proof, give you some points of the progress we're making relative to this strategy. But we'll talk about this, and I'll try to leave some time towards the end of my comments to do some Q&A. So if you have questions, think about those, reserve those at the end. I'd like to hear from you. I'd like to make this useful to you, to make it real for your worlds and really connect. A lot of what I'm going to address today, talk about, is also covered in many topics and sessions today. We've covered some yesterday in detail and some tomorrow. So you'll see some more detail, and we've already talked about some of this detail today. But I'd like to give you a broad overview of what this strategy is and where we are relative to it. But before I even do that, I'd like to tell you about the origins, the sort of core, what is at the very foundation of this strategy. And you know what it is? It's actually you. It's our customers. You are at the very core and center of this strategy that we call the Open Digital Campus. We call this attribute outside in, referring to our focus. Our focus is outside in, as opposed to inside out. And this focus has given us the ability to do two things. First, it's allowed us to design and implement technologies, and I'll talk about some of those. And not just the technologies, but how we deliver them, and all the mechanisms around getting value to you. But the focus has also enabled us to do something else relative to the mechanics and how we deliver, involving our organization. You see, at SunGard, and I'll touch on this a little bit in detail, has reorganized our entire company so that we can sort of automate the focus of outside in, so that we can be structured in such a way that causes all of our resources, all 2,600 dedicated professionals at SunGard Higher Education who do only higher education, to focus them and focus all of us as a company on you, our customers, first. And I'll compare and contrast that to how typical software vendors, of which we were one, operates by contrast. But it's one thing to actually make a lot of changes and moves and implement things, but it's quite another thing to stay very, very close to our customers and measure the progress that we make. So we're doing that. These are some examples. There are many others, but beginning this year globally, we're doing measurements. We're measuring each engagement. We're measuring the broad market on a quarterly basis with a lot of general topics and a general way of getting to the information. But each interaction that we have with you is an opportunity to learn more about what your current challenges are and how we can address them together. That's outside in. But I talked about our structure. So I want to contrast how we're actually structured today versus how we have been in the past. You see, typical IT software vendors are structured in a manner in which the software assets, software and services, products, are governed by product managers. And day in and day out, a product manager is actually responsible for those assets. And then they look to see how they can deploy those assets to the market. Now, we used to operate that way, and I think most software IT vendors operate that way. But see, to me, that's inside out. That's the opposite of what we want to be. If we were to focus on our software assets first and then try to decide how to map those to your needs, that's backwards. So how we are structured instead is today we have product managers who are responsible for sets of needs. We call need centers, and these are they up on this slide. In charge of each need center is a product manager. So in other words, these product managers are responsible for your needs. That's what they think about. Now, of course, we have software and services assets that map to these needs. These product managers have individuals we call product owners, which are the asset owners, and they report to the product manager. So another way of saying this is our software and services assets are subordinate to your needs. So the structure maps to the outside in as well. It's very important to us, and it's working. What we see now is that each of these needs centers has focus groups. They have advisory boards. They interact with what we call development partners as well, which are institutions that go even deeper than an advisory capacity. We share code, we share design, we understand each other's needs and how to get to those solutions quicker and better, more tightly. So this past year, 2010, was tremendous in terms of the progress we've made relative to realizing outside in. But I'd like to highlight that we are a company in transition. So we have much more work to do. We have more to do. We will never be satisfied with ultimately our progress. There was always something else to do. And as we make this transition, my expectation is that you'll see more and more of this outside-in capability. More of SunGard truly understanding real-time the needs of each of your institutions and delivering solutions that map to those needs. Now what I'd like to do is focus on technology a little bit, because of course technology is an enabler of satisfying these needs and how we map to your needs. So today, for the rest of my comments, I'm going to address examples. Example after another. I've picked some examples that highlight various attributes of this outside-in mentality, this customer centrism, and our overall open digital campus strategy. And with each example, I'll highlight some attributes, and we'll talk about these in the context of how I expect that you'll actually see the value of the open digital campus. I'd first like to talk about the delivery of solutions and how that's different in the open digital campus versus in the past. If you think about the past and any software vendor, how bits are transferred into your environments and made live. If you think about large dot releases and how upgrades have worked in the past and how typically they're done even today, I'd like to contrast that with a new way of thinking. And the key word, by the way, in Open Digital Campus is open. Well, what does open mean? Well, to us, open means flexibility. It means the ability to take components and parts and pieces with fewer dependencies. Fewer dependencies. What does that mean? Well, when you think about large dot releases and how upgrades work typically, why is it that we have to take a large piece of software, a large release, and take it all together? Well, the reason is because there are dependencies. There are dependencies between the layers within that stack, and if you touch something, chances are you've affected something else. That's why large ERPs, software, has to come to you in these large dot releases every couple of years. What I've drawn up here on this slide is some categories of bits of software. And we look at these very differently now in the Open Digital Campus. We can look at them separately. We can actually organize them and categorize them in groups that have fewer dependencies between them than the typical large dot releases. So for example, we can think about application components individually in some cases, and I'll share some examples of this. We can also think about infrastructure, things like database upgrades and changes to the database and other parts of the IT infrastructure that, of course, applications are dependent upon. We can think about third-party components, such as those from our partners and other companies. We can think about open source components in another category. And of course, some of you write your own software and bits and pieces. We can talk about those. And then, of course, hopefully you've heard of our community source initiative. I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So these are categories and ways that we can think about components. And these are just examples. This is not an exhaustive list of how we categorize software, but just to provide the concept to you. We can think about them and organize them differently. We can then make them available to you in a flexible fashion that allows you to take essentially a composite of what it is that you need and when you need it, as opposed to having to wait years for big major dot releases and then go through tremendous expense to go through upgrades. And perhaps you only needed 20% of the functionality that came in that upgrade. Perhaps you needed some of that functionality earlier than was made available in that dot release. So the Open Digital Campus thinks about this differently. We will always provide releases as we have in the past for those that would rather have releases that way. Additionally, we are allowing our customers to pull components much earlier, parts of each release, into your environments earlier. So that's the concept. Now, to make this concrete for you, we'll go through some examples because there's a wide range of ways that this Open Digital Campus strategy can be utilized. By the way, we call this release mechanism, this ability to release software in sort of an evolutionary manner like this, we call it evolution. And it is a very specific technology. It is a new way in which solutions can be brought into your institutions quickly. So how does evolution work? Well, let me talk about cloud for just a minute. Cloud is a new mechanism for realizing value. It enables sort of an on-demand method of taking software bits. It also is a way in which you can realize software value without installing any software. But if you think about the middle component here, your institution, and what software is running there and the overhead that it takes on your part to maintain that software, what if, in particular, for those areas of functionality, what if certain components, call it commodity components, are